Dear student, I invite you to this presentation on types of tourism plans. A good prescribed plan serves as a layout for a desired goal. Tourism is rather a complex activity that overlaps several different sectors of the society and economy. Unplanned tourism activities may end up in unexpected and unwanted impacts. In some underdeveloped countries, tourism is also still a relatively new type of activity. Some governments and often the private sectors have little or no experience in how to develop tourism properly. To know more types of tourism plans, we will have the following titles as subtopics and discuss on the same. Levels of tourism planning, types of tourism plans, tourism master plans, inclusive growth concept and tourism, community involvement in tourism. Levels of tourism planning. In this lesson, we are going to study about various levels of tourism planning. This has been done on the basis of geographical boundaries. They are as follows: international planning, national planning, regional planning, sub-regional planning. International planning. This level planning involves international transportation services, the movement and scheduling of the tours of tourists among different countries, the development of major tourist attractions and facilities in neighboring countries, as well as the working strategies and promotional programs of the many countries. The above said matters will usually take place through World Tourism Organization or WTO and its regional commissions, International Civil Aviation Organization ICAO, International Air Transport Association IATA, Pacific Asia Travel Association PATA, Caribbean Tourism Organization CTO, Tourism Council of the South Pacific TCSP, Subcommittee on Tourism SCOT of the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN, Tourism Coordination Unit or TCU of the Southeast Africa Development Coordination Conference, and the Tourism Committee of the Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development OECD. National plans concerned with the following components: tourism policy, infrastructure facilities, a physical structure plan which includes important tourist attractions, selected tourism development regions, international entry points, facilities and services, the amount, kinds and quality of the accommodation and other required tourist facilities and services, the important tour routes in the country and their regional connections, tourism organizational entities, laws and investment policies, tourism marketing strategies and promotion, education and training programs, design standards and facility development, environmental, economic and socio-cultural analysis, national level implementation methods including the short-term development plan and project scheduling, etc. Regional planning. The regional level of tourism planning is for one region of a country, usually a state or province or an island. It is often devised within the framework of an existing national policy. The regional level of tourism planning is more specific than the national planning level. Regional plan emphasizes the following: regional policy, regional entry points and transportation facilities and services, kinds of tourist attractions and their locations, the amount, kinds and location of the tourist accommodation and other tourist facilities and services, location of tourist development areas including resort areas, socio-cultural, environmental, economic and impact analysis, education and training programs on the regional level, marketing techniques and promotion, organizational establishments, laws, regulations and investment policies, implementation methods which include project plans and regional zoning regulations. Sub-regional planning. There is a need for sub-regional planning in some countries or regions. This level of planning is more specific than the regional level. However, it is not as detailed as the resort land use planning. The elements of the sub-regional plan usually include tourist attractions, location of accommodation and other tourist facilities and services, entry points to the sub-region, transportation facilities and infrastructure. Specific benefits of undertaking national and regional tourism planning. There are several important specific benefits of undertaking national and regional tourism planning. These advantages include establishing the overall tourism development objectives and policies. What is tourism aiming to accomplish and how can these aims be achieved? Developing tourism so that its natural and cultural resources are indefinitely maintained and conserved for future as well as present use. Integrating tourism into the overall development policies and patterns of the country or region and establishing those linkages between tourism and other economic sectors. Providing a rational basis for decision making by both the public and private sectors on tourism development. Making possible the coordinated development of all the many elements of tourism sector. This includes interrelating the tourist attractions, activities, facilities and services and the various and increasingly fragmented tourist markets. Optimizing and balancing the economic, environmental and social benefits of tourism with equitable distribution of these benefits to the society while minimizing possible problems of tourism. Providing a physical structure which guides the location, types and extent of tourism development of attractions, facilities, services and infrastructure. Establishing the guidelines and standards for preparing detailed plans of specific tourism development areas that are consistent with and reinforce one another and for the appropriate design of tourist facilities. Laying the foundation for effective implementation of the tourism development policy and plan and continuous management of the tourism sector by providing the necessary organizational and other institutional framework. Providing the framework for effective coordination of the public and private sector efforts and investment in developing tourism. Offering a baseline for the continuous monitoring of the progress of tourism development and keeping it on track. Types of tourism plans. Tourism is a multifaceted, multi-sectoral activity. Therefore, a tourism plan is necessary to coordinate the different sectors to do better services to the needs of tourism and the general public. Designing of sound tourism planning helps tourism in a controlled, integrated and sustainable manner. This approach can generate substantial economic benefits to an area without creating any serious environmental or social problems. Types of tourism plans include land use planning, facility site planning, facility design, special studies. Land use planning. Tourist development areas selected as tourist resorts, resort towns, tourist attractions and urban tourism impose land use plans. This level of planning is more detailed and shows the specific areas for hotels and other types of accommodation, retail shops, recreation, parks, roads, walkways, airport, railway station, water supply, electric power, solid and waste disposal and telecommunications. These plans include pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, evaluation of environmental and socio-cultural influences and development planning. Zoning regulations, architectural landscaping and engineering design standards are often prepared for this type of planning. Facility site planning. Site planning is planning for individual buildings such as hotels, commercial centers and visitor facilities. The actual location of buildings, recreation areas, streets, walkways, parking, landscaping areas and other land uses are usually shown in maps. Facility design. Designs for landscaping, architecture, infrastructure and engineering must be prepared for resorts, hotels, restaurants, attractions, archaeological and historic sites, information and cultural centers, visitor facilities at national parks and other tourist facilities. Special studies. Special studies on tourism are often undertaken based on the needs of the area. These studies pertain to environmental, socio-cultural, economic impact analysis, marketing analysis and promotion programs. Special planning studies can also be done on specific types of tourism development such as health and youth tourism. Tourism master plans. Tourism master plans are a step ahead of the ordinary tourism planning because the master plans involve planning for a larger area of operation, say a state or a country. It encompasses all the activities that are needed for a tourism development. It involves macro level as well as micro level planning. It involves every possible detail that will be necessary to make the experience of tourism into a memorable one. Steps of Tourism Master Plan. In respect to the introduction of the Tourism Master Plan, the following steps will be appropriate steps for a Tourism Master Plan. Establishing objectives, assessment of resources, formulation of policy, allocation of budget, regional planning and development, infrastructure planning and development, human resource planning and development, implementation planning, marketing planning, monitoring and control. In the steps listed above for the Tourism Master Plan, establishing objectives refer to the role of the administration to decide on the places of tourist attraction for a region and on the type of tourism that can be promoted in those destinations, the immediate development needed at the destinations for the development of tourism and other sectoral necessities for the purpose of development. In the follow-up of the decisions for the establishment of objectives, the assessment of resources is done for all sectors of the tourism aspect so that the objective set can be fulfilled in the appropriate manner. It is important for the developers to make sure that the available resources are used appropriately without creating any negative impacts through tourism development on the physical, economical and socio-cultural aspects. In the stage of formation of policy, the administration needs to spell out categorically what it aims in the way of tourism development by listing the proposals and regulations. This will help the investors, beneficiaries, namely the businessmen in different levels, and the users, namely the tourists, so that these people can also make their own plans for themselves. In the event of successful formulation of policy for the development of tourism, the governments concerned will have to earmark a specified amount for the purpose of different schemes and proposals. In this regard, the governments usually announce various incentives and subsidies so that the program for the development of tourism is taken by the investors with more interest. In the event of clear policy and proper budgetary allocation of funds for tourism schemes, The process of planning begins with the regional planning, infrastructure planning and human resource planning, which are very much same as that of tourism planning process. In achieving these planning steps, the most important part will be reached, which is the implementation planning. In this step, the care is for the priority of operation of various sectors so that the development are done in a proper way. Thus, the tourism master plan is a systematic process by which the development of tourism is brought in to a larger region, say a state or a country. Tourism development in India, it is known, started from the year 1946 following the Sargent Committee report. The Government of India concentrated in the tourism development boldly only on the late 1960s owing to the commitment for the government on the development of basis infrastructure for the common man in the early years of independence to the nation. In the early 1990s, the Government of India was able to thrust open a powerful campaign for the development of tourism in India by a wonderful tourism master plan. This tourism master plan was termed as the National Action Plan for Tourism, NAPT. The readers are provided here experts from the National Action Plan for Tourism that has paved the way for the success of tourism development in India for the 21st century. The objectives of the National Action Plan for Tourism were listed as socio-economic development of areas, increasing employment opportunities, developing domestic tourism especially for the budget category, preservation of national heritage and environment, development of international tourism and optimization of foreign exchange earnings, diversification of the tourism product, increasing India's share in world tourism. Based on the objectives of the National Action Plan of Tourism, the Ministry of Civil Aviation and Tourism proposed the following action plan at its level. Creation of Special Tourism Areas, STAs, as noted zones for intensive development, starting the scheme for giving assistance for specified tourism areas, ASTA, for providing finances for tourism and tourism related industry in specified areas or circuit. Special category of heritage hotels or health resorts to be created and provided with technical or consultancy help, loans from financial institutions, interest subsidy, marketing and operation expertise, tourism trains to be started on important tourism routes based on the success of Palace on Wheels, river cruises to be operated in specific circuits, revamping of foreign offices to make them more accountable in terms of specified targets, information revolution, information system to be revamped to provide positive projection of India in all leading markets, special airline or hotel packages for selected tourist destinations, provision of information counter for airlines, trains, hotels, tourist information at major international airports, tourist facilities such as immigration, customs, luggage, money changing facilities, airport coaches and taxis at major international airports, liberalized characters through announced policy and automatic clearance, open sky policy for the routes on which Air India does not operate or operates in a limited fashion. In doing these initiatives, the Government of India got itself ready for the new millennium and the 21st century. Inclusive growth concept and tourism. Definition. Inclusive growth is a concept that advances equitable opportunities for economic participants during economic growth with benefits incurred by every section of the society. The definition of inclusive growth implies direct links between the macroeconomic and microeconomic determinants of the economy and economic growth. The inclusive growth as a strategy for economic development received attention owing to a rising concern that the benefits of economic growth have not been equitably shared. Growth is inclusive when it creates economic opportunities along with ensuring equal access to them. Tourism is known to be a major contributor to inclusive growth. According to K.C. Chakrabarty, Deputy Governor RBI, inclusive growth allows people to contribute to and benefit from economic growth. The concept of inclusive growth results in poverty reduction through creation of employment opportunities across all segments of the society. It includes the excluded agents whose participation is essential in the development process and not just welfare targets of the developmental programs. Inclusive growth is equal to equal opportunities plus equal access to people. Linking inclusive growth explicitly to tourism is a relatively new development that shares certain principles with more established pro-poor tourism approach. Inclusive growth is not yet an established alternative as the principles and framework for implementing a new model for growth remain at an abstract level of discussion rather than being a policy recommendation. Inclusive growth as a concept is increasingly discussed by academics, international agencies and policy makers. It is evident that inclusive growth is concerned with economic growth, but it is equally clear that this is not only mechanism driving the inclusive growth strategy. It typically focuses on the economic and social aspects. Community involvement in tourism. Community participation has become a common element in many development initiatives such as community-based programs, which assume participatory methods and has been promoted by development organizations, notably the World Bank, to address the inefficiency of highly centralized development approaches, particularly in the developing world. Levels of community participation in tourism. As a framework to understand true participation of communities in tourism development vis-a-vis the private sector, a spectrum of community involvement in tourism has been arrived at. This frame has been adopted from Roger Hart's Ladder of Participation. Spectrum of community involvement in tourism. Ownership, collaborating, consulting, informing, tokenism. Levels of involvement by role played by communities. Tokenism, employing members of the community as drivers, tour guides, etc. Informing, where communities are informed about the tourism development being planned and are involved through employment in the tourism activities. Consulting, where the communities are consulted with but where the aspirations of the community might or might not be addressed. In this instance, the community would have the space to influence decisions while not being a formal part of the decision-making process. Collaborating, where communities are seen as equal partners in the ecotourism development planned and are formally part of the decision-making process. The community would then have control over the impacts as well as the benefits of tourism. Ownership, where the community owns the enterprise which becomes the capital of the community, where the pace, nature, forms, stakeholders are all decided by the communities and all others involved are supporters of the enterprise. The above framework is not comprised of clear-cut categories, rather it is continuum that the private enterprise finds itself located on. The higher up in the community engagement, the larger are the areas of mutual interest and the greater is the role of the communities in decision making and control of the positive and negative fallouts of tourism. Conclusion. This lesson put forth the various levels of tourism, types of tourism, steps involved in master plan in tourism. Finally, it discussed about the inclusive growth concept in tourism and community involvement in tourism. Thank you.